All right, so for today's painting, you need your white and black, your raw umber, which is a brown, primary yellow, cadmium orange, the light green, it's kind of a lime green color, and hooker's green. Kind of a dark green, but it's not the blue green. With this, we are going to kind of do a fall painting because I'm getting ready to feel kind of fallish. You're going to take your umber. You pick the size of your canvas. I'm not picky on what size you choose to do. I'm going to make a couple dots of my umber, a couple dots of white, and I'm going to use one of the bigger brushes in our art kit. I personally want the grain because we are trying to make a wood grain background, but you do what you feel is best because not everyone's painting should look the same. Iron out. Try to go all the way to the edges of your canvas. If you need to, go back in, add a few more dots. A lot darker than I wanted it right there. Just trying to get the whole wood grain look. Kind of like a weathered barn wood. If you feel like using a different brown, go for it. It is completely up to you. I am just here as a suggestion. Once you have that all done, let it rest before you do the next step. For this next part, put a little bit of black in a paint well. You are just adding lines to create separate boards. So I'm going to try to make a straight line. Does not need to be perfect. Choose whatever paintbrush you feel like using. I did not let my background dry quite enough, but that might also be a look that you are going for. One nice thing about acrylic is it usually dries fairly fast. I think the brush is bigger than I thought it was going to be. Play around with your brushes. You have a whole plethora of them to choose from. Alright, so those are my dividing lines to make it look like there are 3 boards of wood. I'm just going to go in now and kind of make some grains. Act like there's a knot in the wood there. And like I said, you might want a different look. If you want it to be on drier brown, go for it. I kind of like how it's blending into my brown. Don't worry too much about what you decide is the bottom of your board because we will be adding some pumpkins down there. Like I said, we're doing kind of a fall theme. Trying to maybe encourage some colder weather. And then let it dry. And I mean seriously, let it dry before we go on to our pumpkins. Otherwise that brown and black is going to get into your orange and it's going to look really weird. I would suggest trying to find a white colored pencil, white crayon, or just a pencil, whatever you can find, so that way we can draw our pumpkins. Alright, so for this next part, you might want a colored pencil or a regular pencil. I'm going to use a white colored pencil, and I'm going to draw, I'm going to get this wet. I have some watercolored pencils. Watercolor pencils are amazing, especially for this. If you wet it, it kind of softens it. And I'm going to draw the outline of my pumpkin. Now see, when I have this wet colored pencil, it kind of softens the lead. You can get these at Walmart, honestly, or you can order them online. You don't have to have them. You could use just a regular colored pencil or a regular pencil. The only reason I'm trying to use this watercolor pencil is so hopefully you can see the lines that I'm adding. I kind of made it a heart shape or butt shape, whatever you want to call it. And now I'm going to make the pumpkin lines on this pumpkin. So that way when we start adding some color, we can know where our highs and our darks and lows should be. So I'm just adding kind of this crisscross, like two ovals are crossing in the middle here to create the middle of this pumpkin. And then I'm going to add one more hump right here. Bring that all the way down. And then I'm going to put another one right here. Kind of hard to see where I had my white mixing in with my brown. And then right here, I'm going to have a stem coming up. And kind of the back of my pumpkin here. Just bumping up. Hopefully y'all can see that. I'm going to draw another little pumpkin right here. Again, kind of that butt shape. Apple, whatever shape you want to call it. I was going to say, as long as you recognize it as a pumpkin. Which, and they don't need to be perfect, because when was the last time you saw a pumpkin that was perfectly shaped? Those organic shapes are constantly changing. Put my lines on there so we know where to put the darker orange in comparison to the white. Again, got a stem. And then some little bumps in the back. And there we have pumpkins. Hopefully you can kind of see my lines. Your lines don't need to look as perfect as mine. Mine are by nowhere close to how perfectly I'd like them to look. But those are how your lines should look. Next, you are going to want to get some orange. I don't encourage you putting paint over your paint tray, or in your paint tray over your painting, but I'm doing it so you can see. Put some orange, yellow, and white into some of your paint wells. And pick out maybe a few different brushes because you're going to want kind of a mixture of them as you're painting. I always like to have a handful of them handy because I switch them out as I paint. But I am going to take kind of a medium-sized brush, and I'm going to use orange to paint on my lines. And we're going to build up layers until this is solid against that background. So right now it might look kind of weird because you can see through it, but as we build up our layers, we won't be able to see through our pumpkins anymore. So I'm just going over my lines that I just drew with white, going over them with orange, kind of building it up. And honestly, we might have to do a couple layers of that. So now I'm going to go over this one. Kind of bumped that up a little bit more to make it look more pumpkin-like. Just tracing over those lines. Now, I like to put my paint on kind of thick. I like that texture of the bumpiness. I don't like to smooth it out. I did smooth out the background, but on something like this, if you leave that kind of pop of texture, it gives it more of a 3D color like look, especially as we start blending. Bump that up a little bit. So now got some orange on there. I'm going to build it up a little bit more. And as we go, it'll also build more. This black line's a little dark, but it'll start to cover up. I'm going to go ahead and grab some yellow. Same brush. I mixed it. It's okay. I can always get more. And I'm going to kind of start painting this in. And yes, I'm blending it right in with that orange. But not so much that I lose an orange line, because I still want that orange shadow in the crevices, technically. So there, I got that. I'm at least going to leave brush strokes and not stamps. So now I'm going to go on to some more yellow in this section. Notice how I'm going right along that orange to try to leave that orange line, because that would be the crevices of your pumpkin. Now right now I'm working wet paint into wet paint. It's a style that I like to use when I'm creating shadows in different tones, but if you feel like you would rather build it up individually, let it dry in between each layer. You do what you feel you need to do. So I'm filling in with that yellow. Now I'm just using the yellow to create a lighter orange. I don't want it to be yellow per se. So that's why I am trying to blend it in with the orange that is left on my brush and what I've built up on my painting. And I can always go back in with a smaller brush on those orange lines to darken it up, or even go in with a little bit of a reddish, that red-orange hue that is in our kit, and darken that up, or even a brown of some sort mixed with my orange. It's just kind of building that up. Yes, you can still kind of see some of my wood lines through that, but that's okay as we build this up, because I still need to add some white highlights in this. As I build that up, it'll start to disappear. Now, yes, we could have just painted this white right away, which, yes, your colors would show up. If you feel like you would rather paint your pumpkin white first, you go for it. I just would rather build up paint instead of painting my pumpkin, redrawing my lines, and letting it dry. Probably would have been easier to paint it white first, but I have been known to not do things the easy way. Some in there, some in there. So now my pumpkin's looking a little bit more fallish. I'm going to get a little bit of orange in some of these sections. I'm going to let this dry a little bit, and then I'm going to come in and do another layer of orange and yellow real quick. So I'm not going to do my white yet, just because I want to build up those colors, and if I keep moving it around on the wet, it's just going to keep blending in and moving off. So I'm going to let it dry for a little bit. I'm going to go on to my other pumpkin and do the same exact thing, and then I will show you what the next layer looks like.